Hello everyone, today I'm going to give a presentation on the first part of the book, The Secret Life of Said, the Pessoptimist. So firstly, some information about the author. Emily Habibi is an Israeli Arab, born in Haifa on August 29, 1922. He was one of the leaders of the Palestinian Communist Party, and after the UN resolution, he helped to form an Israeli Communist Party as well. He began to write small stories in the 1950s, and The Pessoptimist was actually his first novel, written in 1972. His last novel was published in 1992, and he actually published 5 works in total in that long period of time. And in 1992 as well, he received an Israeli Prize for Arabic Literature. First chapter, Said, the main character, claims that he have met the creatures from outer space. He says he has been chosen because he's an office boy, and even tells the reader an anecdote to support that. Later, he talks about a happy coincidence that happened to him. In the war where his father died, he was saved by a donkey from a bullet, which made his life in Israel possible. Said also talks about his family's origin and discusses his more modern relatives and their high positions. Finally, he talks about how his family fled to Lebanon for safety. He also mentions how he went to Israel for the first time and talks about the origin of the actual name Pessoptimist, bringing an example of his brother's death to question whether his family is optimistic or pessimistic, and still not finding the answer. So the main reason for Said to visit Israel was to meet Adon Safsarshek, who was his father's friend. And on his journey to meeting him, he talks about the phenomenon of bodies becoming larger as they get further away from us, and the importance of the name of the ancient family to Israeli authorities. He then talks about his school life for a little while, talks about Yuad, who was his first love, which is reasonable because later Said has to stay in his former principal's house in Acre while waiting to meet Mr. Safrashek. He talks to the guests at the principal's house, and later they have a philosophical discussion with the principal about Middle Eastern history and Israel. There was a very interesting quote that I read. There is nothing holier than human blood. That's why a country is called the Holy Land. And by chapter 10, he tells the readers about his family other trait, which in my opinion, is it too nice? I will leave the quote on the screen for you guys to look. This part of the book was quite random in my opinion because it goes through different timings of Said's life. So he firstly talks about how he met the daughter of a farmer, Khazala, on the way to the Lebanese border and fell in love with her. Then Said meets Handi, who shows him around the catacombs of Acre, but then he realizes it was all a dream, and that's when he first met the person from outer space in his opinion. Finally, Said meets Adon Safsarshek, gets 10 pounds for him, and becomes employed as the leader of the Union of Palestine Workers. Soon after that, Said started learning Hebrew by comparing English and Hebrew shop names, and later on reading newspapers. Chapters of this part, Said is being told by some big man from the authorities that his movement has been detected by them. So while he was planning to visit the man from outer space again without being detected, he receives unexpected guests, Yuad and her sister, after a long time of not seeing each other. He's very happy at first, but his happiness goes away when Yuad asks him if he was responsible for her father's arrest and if he's a hooded informer like his father. Said doesn't believe that his father would do such things, but she tells him that his father was among those who helped single out certain people and send them to prison camps as political prisoners. After Yuad decides to stay at Said's house because she crossed the border to Israel illegally and she knew that authorities would look for her. Later that night, the Israeli soldiers break in and take Yuad as an infiltrator. Before she's taken away, she calls Said her husband. Finally, Said gets a letter from Yuad asking to save her father from prison. He feels very sympathetic for her, so he makes a deal with his boss Jacob that he will get her out of prison in exchange for Said's loyalty and faithfulness. So for a long time, he was continually sabotaging the communist community as told, but still didn't get to see Yuad. Finally, by the end of part 1, Said gets married.